try to prepare this particular application for UN country teams. And that's, again, something that Peter was involved with a lot. We basically could harness this work on the goals, because when we started talking to UN country teams, they said the most important thing for us, the entry points are goals, the priorities that the country establishes in the context of the CC, so of the common country assessments, and that's then where the gap happens. When you come to a common country assessment, you identify priorities, but that's when you forget to include the MEAs, because it's just too complex to get familiar with this landscape of MEAs. I mean, it's like quite terrible. So in the end of the day, we have included in the Infomea 4 project one element of making MEA content digestibly accessible to UNCTs. That's one of the mandates. The second mandate that came right from the Infomea Steering Committee meeting, that was more related to linking using artificial intelligence and ChatGPT in that context, because it's very contentious to use ChatGPT in the context of the MEA focal points, who are such experts that, any kind of fabulation can be an issue. But in the context of preparing MEA content for not educated audiences, like UN country teams most likely are, you can harness the potential of GTP that can provide you summaries of these complex issues and how they are linked, without, so to say, upsetting the legislative or the normative soul of a negotiator or an MEA stakeholder. And then we have pitched something to the digital transformation subprogram that has allowed us to do some initial work. And then we created the implementation arrangements. Here you see some of we tendered it out to the web to do some of it. And then, of course, we have also included it in our instruments with Zoe and others to make sure that this work is being done. And the initial results are actually, on the one hand, a mini chatbot. As we also use this funding to improve our maps, to improve the way we are harvesting projects from Jeff and making those projects available. And we also, of course, created a mini chatbot that you can test on all the national implementation plans that are pertaining to the Minamata Convention. We did this at that time with Ken Davis, who is now the person who has moved from Geneva to Nairobi to work on VESRA. So he knows us, and we did this, but then because he had moved to VESRA, he was not able to really validate the accuracy of the text that was that this ChatGPT would retrieve. This has been built from scratch by ODWeb as well, and it gives you the source of the document from which this ChatGPT is coming. Another important deliverable of this work, so they have created a GitHub repository so programmers can look at it. But one important application was this, and I'm curious whether this loads now on my poor machine that is completely overloaded, this Figma. And there I will maybe hand over to Peter to quickly introduce it again. If you can maybe show the Figma, because my machine has given up.
Yeah, I can just share.
Just very quickly, because what we are now doing, Andy, and I have just prepared the pitch, we are now pitching again to the digital transformation team to have this particular application for UN country teams implemented either in the context of VESRA or in the context of another tool, and to have it developed and coordinated through Andrea Risso's work from the policy unit. We are trying to connect this to the UN country team network of UNEP, and preliminary conversations showed that especially Uzbekistan and South Africa would be potential candidates. And so we think that's a great potential for the future, and it's also a way of really showing the logical evolution of Infomea being mainstreamed into processes that are not at the core of MEA stakeholders, which is the only way to kind of enhance elements. So very quickly over to you, Peter, of how this looks, and especially maybe the GTP element of it.
Yeah, thanks, Eva. There's a bit of an echo. So yeah, there's 4 main sections. The broad idea of the platform is to take content from existing platforms across collective intelligence, so Infomea, and the particular point in Infomea where that data exists, but also LEAP and Judicial Portal, and aggregate the data that's most relevant to UNCTs in one place. So they get an overview of what's available that they might not be aware is available, coming to it from a perspective that they may not have a lot of background on what these MEAs are or what they do. And then they can see that little bit of data on that data, information on that data type. But then at some point, the platform redirects them to where that data set exists in its original form. So briefly, there's the overview, which is kind of the at least content type, the cornerstone, because it's all organized as Infomia is around the MEAs. So you can see the MEA membership. If you hover over, you get a little bit more detail. You get the topics that they're related to that you can also access from here. So if you come in as a UNCT, you know you're interested in plastics, but you have no concept of which MEAs are relevant for plastics, then you could filter for that. This would direct you to the Infomia page of that MEA. This would direct you to a collection of IISD reports that Katie had basically integrated into the negotiator section. So it puts you right there. They wouldn't necessarily find it otherwise. This is a replication of the maps of GIS data that we have in Infomia, so Ramsar and World Heritage sites. This simply goes to the contacts. One goes to the Montevideo focal point contact in LEAP. The other goes to the contacts hub in Infomia, categorized by MEA, and upcoming meetings that goes to the events tab on Infomia, which is populated via API automatically from the MEAs. So that's the overview. I'll do implementation last, if that's okay, because it's a bit more detailed. Documents Hub is again just pointing to additional document types to let them know that that exists, and then redirecting them to the place on the website where they exist, where they could get more details, more filtering options, etc. So national legislation, you'd have some examples of what exists just to pique their interest. You can see the full set of legislation over here. That would go to this set of 3,500 pieces of legislation for, in this case, Indonesia on LEAP. Court decisions, same idea, it would redirect to the judicial portal. Case studies redirects to LEAP, where these case studies exist, often have been collected as part of the toolkits on plastics, on air quality, etc. And then Jeff projects, so longer term goal for Infomia that's already been piloted a little bit with Minamata is to get project data from GEF and then to be able to categorize that and house that on Infomia according to MEA. So once that were live, then you would be able to go and see which Jeff projects in country are related to the Basel Convention in Indonesia. Global goals. So this is also based on some interviews that had been done with UNCTs and RCs in terms of what they want and try and understand where they come at this from. And what we understand is that SDGs are very important. Also in this last call on Tuesday, from what I understood from Andrea's comments, is they want to be able to integrate the monitoring frameworks of MEAs or align them at least with the monitoring frameworks within the CCAs and the cooperation frameworks. And so as I understand it, it's hard to make that connection directly, but those should both at some level be aligned with this guiding framework, global framework of the SDGs down to the target or indicator framework, indicator level. So if you can map the CCAs and the CA cooperation frameworks to the SDGs, and you can map the SDGs to the MEA implementation plans, which have their own monitoring frameworks in terms of indicators, then that's the way kind of to make this connection, which is why we think the goals section that we're developing, that Katie's developing on Infomia and will be live soon, is so important and prominent to this UNCT application. So here we don't want to replicate what already exists on the goals page because they can see it in more detail there already, but we at least want to give them the idea that that does exist. So if you went from here, the user knows that they have a priority of SDG 14 and they know that 15, and even within that, they know that they have this priority or that there's this monitoring framework that's connected to target 15.5. You can select 15.5. You can see which MEA strategic frames. This is a replication of what already exists on the goals page. And then at some point, it would direct you to go there. And then also the Kunming biodiversity framework and the chemicals framework. The last element is the implementation, MEA implementation. So this is the only section, at least in this, this just initial concept visual mockup that involves something beyond just aggregating data that exists somewhere else, presenting it in a visually compact way to let them know what's there and then redirecting them to that point. because it shows that here. It shows what national reports are available per MEA that this country, in this case Indonesia, is party to, and as well as national plans. But as this additional layer of generating summaries using AI functionality. So the idea here, as opposed to the chatbot, which was fairly custom built by OdaWeb, and turned out to be very costly, where you were trying to ask very specific questions against a very specific set of documents. So, for instance, how many women artisanal small-scale gold miners are there in this country? A very pointed, specific question that would only have an answer from one or two specific reports. And so also the specific set of 20 reports from Minamata on small-scale gold mining. Here, the idea is to move away a bit from that, to see instead what can be gleaned from a predefined prompt over a large section of documents on which almost zero preparation has been done. Because, for instance, Indonesia, you have over 100 national reports. If you replicate this over not even all countries, 100 countries where they have enough volume to get something worthwhile, still that's way too large a volume of documents that you would be able to do any sort of formatting or parsing to make that work correctly on this kind of pointed chatbot functionality with an AI. So the idea is, it's a test case to see what we can get across unformatted documents with a prefigured prompt, noting that these reports and documents are kind of impenetrable otherwise to someone like a UNCT, even someone who has some knowledge of the MEA, because there's so many and there's so many different formats. And two, that AI is actually quite good at generating summaries, where it's not always good at creating a specific answer. But it's good at kind of drawing really disparate information and creating a natural language summary. So the idea is you click generate summary. That indicates to the user that it's not something that exists that's been pre-filled before, but you're actually creating it in the act of pressing generate summary. You get the summary. Right now it's just lorem ipsum, but we tried a little bit on Indonesia, and we got we don't go that, but and then here you have more details that would in theory show you which documents it drew the answer from. So yeah, that's the last aspect of